In life, we're looking for how do I make a living and how do I make a retirement and how do I get my life on track and how do I make sure I make enough to take care of myself and take care of the ones I love and to literally do everything in life that I'd long to do, such as travel or do some educational programming or literally give back to the community in some philanthropic way. The challenge today that we have is that so many people are trying to vie for the same opportunities that we're not necessarily giving away everything we do. Isn't that true? I mean, there's a lot of services online for free. There's Fiverr that gives all sorts of graphic design work for next to nothing. The problem is, though, aren't we devaluing people's abilities? When people make a living, they have to make a true living. And if someone's only making $5 after off of 20 hours of work, we're devaluing them worse than minimum wage or the workers in China. The reality is these companies are thriving and making money, and somehow they're making a profit off of this devaluation of the human being. You see, when we devalue a life, we really destroy a life. A lot of the conversation and commentary in the political marketplace today, especially coming out of Kamala Harris's camp, is talking about how teachers are underpaid. This is absolutely true. I know because I worked for a short time in public school as a professor, if you will, of education in both a professional university setting or a continuing learning network setting, which I guess is no longer in existence because I'm not finding it on its website link anymore. And I did that for about 16 sessions, teaching the Japanese language. But I also worked in public school for a short period of time, maybe a year and a half, helping out the local school system as myself, helping children learn Japanese. I have to say I wasn't necessarily the best professor to all the children. I was still learning how to impart the language, but immediately after that, I launched into something that changed and transformed my own life in terms of teaching the language, but also in sharing the language in a way that made the most sense to people. I, of course, had some loving siblings who were sort of in the educational field that I could bounce some ideas off of and who could tell me about the Gillingham method and other things that helped me to teach how to write Japanese and do other things that I hadn't really thought about before, and it worked beautifully to learn that little kinesthetic capability. But the reality is, in life, we have to have people in our lives that are really supportive of who we are and what we're trying to become. I've gone through my stint of being in the marketing field where I went from being a professional photographer, an architectural photographer, if you will, and literally traveling the nation, going to 72 cities in 1 year based on a sale that another sibling made. But the problem was that the handler between us wasn't really paying attention to light and timing and how important all of that is in the photographic realm. Back then, we still used film, and then we transferred it to digital. It was a little bit costly, but it worked. Then they decided to purchase what they felt was an expensive digital camera. It really wasn't awesome, but it worked, and it did the job. Then after a while, they decided, they didn't need a professional photographer with a good eye to do all this work. They could just send out a salesman to do the shots. And then they decided, you know what? We could just have the people who work there take the photography. So in a very short period of time, my position working as an independent contractor for that company got really outsourced. Outsourced, really insourced back to the company who was using the co-op dollars to make these beautiful marketing brochure, glossy, high gloss things themselves. The challenge I find today is that I don't have any of my portfolio left at all. I literally had to throw away all the catalogs that I had of samples of my work because it was getting hard to store it all. And in life, we have this way of hoarding things that we design and we do, but sometimes we just have to let things go. In life, we also grow in what we do. So when I left that work, I went into doing website design. I had to learn a lot. I was not the most sophisticated at the time, but I still did some community work for the Arts and Design District and the Ad Back organization, and literally I did the work for free, and they sort of insulted me through the whole process. It was really sad, but there's nothing I could do about it. Then a really powerhouse kind of agency came in and took over the whole thing, and I'm glad. But I still have one of the videos that I did long ago, kind of supporting the little work that I did by taking photographs of shops that were involved and putting that out there. It had kind of a swinging music behind it that, came off of YouTube that you could choose, and it was great. But then I had to move on to build a life for myself and to make a living. And in doing so, I made some connections with a variety of professionals in the community. I was amongst the first to create a networking forum. I was there about the time that Rainmakers launched, but I didn't have the GQ fellas and girls who are Barbie dolls to help promote the event. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. I'm just saying, look at me. I don't look like that. And openly, folks, we know that based on statistics and based on psychology reviews and research, etc., that looks do matter to people. The sad thing is that the soul is not always satisfied in those moments of time. That when we're looking at looks, we don't really look at a person's uniqueness, about their talents, about what they can do, or what they could learn from participating in a team like that. When I launched my Business Strategy and Technology Forum, which ran for a good 3 years as a 50-person sort of event, it worked really well. We did that quarterly, and it gave us plenty of time to mail the invites and invite people. And I remember that there was one time that a fellow in an electric company decided he couldn't come for whatever reason, and he wanted his money back. And I'm pretty sure we mailed him back the check, but it was only $20. So hopefully he's not upset with us if we didn't get there, or if the mail, God forbid, got stolen. I know a lot about that because I've had a lot of mail theft in my life, and openly it all began when I moved to a new place in Noblesville. But I can tell you that another day. The reality is we're sort of taking a walk down my historic lane. After a while of doing that, I started and I launched a Japanese language program. It was amongst the first in the community, and openly it was one of the few that served people who were not native Japanese, even though I have native Japanese family in my groupings. But in reality, it allowed the non-native, the American, the foreigner from different lands who were here studying other things, to come into the program through the IUPUI Continuing Learning Network and then filter into my program after the fact, because there wasn't enough people who wanted to go on in those introductory courses, and they all loved to come over to my program, which was a private classroom in the Arts and Design District of Carmel. I literally ran that program from starting in the very early beginnings with just a few teenagers and my loving little buddy named Chris, who launched the whole thing, and literally he was with me almost to the very end. His parents were sort of a split couple, but that's okay. They loved that child enough to put him in my programs, and I can't say he was the most stellar of students, but I really loved him as a kid. And I'm not disparaging him in any way, shape, or form. It's unlikely he's going to see this video, but you know what? He's still in my LinkedIn network even today. A lot of my students have grown up and matured and are now adults. Some of my favorite students from that public school experience of working in the Carmel public school systems actually are now college students or about to graduate. I'm so proud of how far they've come, and we had some really mature, healthy kids who went through that program despite there being a lot of disparity in that part of town. The reality is that most children do go on to something else. The question is, do we have the right to grow, to change, to outthink ourselves, to outwear ourselves, or to realize that at a certain stage in life we have the rights to our own personhood, paperwork, and property? I talk about this a lot in my little marketing politicians video, where the most important things in people's lives are just that, who they are as a person, meaning what they do for their own life, their own health, their own wealth, if you will, and their own relationships. And then we get to their paperwork, what makes them legal in the land, and all the things that are involved in their legal name, from their banking information to their healthcare information to their mental health information, because we all go through losses in life, and sometimes we just need somebody to talk to. I learned that in my college years when I lost my first long-term girlfriend, and openly it took a lot out of me. She didn't handle it very well, and openly it took a major impact on a sensitive soul. I sort of left it alone from there. But beyond that, I went overseas. I learned a lot. I did a lot of things. I learned the language proficiently, and I came back home, and I literally built a language school. My school was recognized even by the native Japanese speakers in the native Japanese Saturday school. When they would get calls from people to go to their little exploratory program, they usually would transfer people over to us, and they would always recommend our program. I can't say I did the best presentation the day that we were invited to do it because I was sort of nervous. I was developing a PowerPoint slide presentation, and it's kind of hard to speak in a foreign language and do those sort of things when it's not impromptu. But my loving spouse at the time kind of took over and did a pretty good job, but it wasn't as good as it could have been had she allowed me to just keep continuing on. I think the Japanese would have regarded me better if I just kept plugging along, but my gal was impatient, and she was difficult in that way. But in life, we outgrow people, and at some point in a long-term relationship, we move on in our souls when things are not going well. And at this point in stage, I'm no longer with my Japanese spouse, and I've kind of moved on in my own heart too. She has as well. She's remarried in her home country, and my loving son has got his own family, and allegedly I've got some Japanese grandchildren up there. I'd love to see a picture sometime, but some monster decided to delete his phone number out of my cell phone system of Google Voice, which originally was Grand Central, and I was amongst the first who participated in that program. I actually had 4 lines going for all the different things I was doing in the different programs because it was appropriate. And openly, I don't think I still have access to all of them, and I've been cyber hacked out of 2 of them. So that leaves me with only the new one that I have now, which I don't really like the number on, but I still remember the numbers for the old ones. Unfortunately, there's no way to really re-access those things because once the Noblesville monsters, or Nazis as I call them, basically cyber hacked me out of my Japanese language school phone number, I was not able to retrieve what I needed in a court case. I thought that was pretty malicious and malintended and a lot of malfeasance, if you will, almost malpractice, but nobody wants to talk about those things today. And the truth is, when I visited some lawyers that do those type of work, they all said that it was almost impossible in the state of Indiana to get any doctor to admit their wrongdoings. Isn't that horrible? That we have people who have had really bad sufferings who literally can't get any justice in the land. Now, when I talk about these things, I'm just telling a story. But my life has taken quite an interesting turn. I've gone from being in Japanese language instruction for 15 years to openly still being a trainer of sorts. I've always been in training. Even when I worked in manufacturing, I was actually the training coordinator. And I had to research a lot of things. I had to build libraries for people and associates who didn't have college degrees to read to help improve their life skills and their business skills and their professional skills. And several young women, literally, and some a couple older than me, actually went on to greater positions because of my tutelage. That was a long time ago. I was fairly young in those stages, but it was also pre-spouse and pre-everything, and I lived in what we call BFA, but that's okay. It was a good 20-minute drive between where I lived in a particular town called Seymour and the place where I worked in an automotive facility. It doesn't really matter whether or not I stayed in contact with any of those people. There was only one or two people that in the end of my time there really were kind of close enough that I could say something to if I wanted to, but the truth is I don't choose to be in a relationship with them. But you know what the monsters who've been harassing my life did? They decided to come into my house, and I opened a drawer that had been literally saran wrap shut from the move. And all of a sudden they started calling people that I had business cards of. I would be really livid to find out if they called my vice chairman from that company, who's Japanese and older than most, and started talking to him about my life. That is a vile act. It is unprofessional, it is unacceptable, and they have no lawful right to my life. You see, in life, I have no right to your life, just as you have no right to my life. But if we open our lives to one another, that's a choice we make. When the door gets slammed shut or closed gently, it's still a choice that one person of the two made. My late father, Bill Ensign, always said, when two people meet, one of them is sold. He was a great salesman for General Electric, and we have been honored by the fact that he worked for that company for 42 years. Think about that, 42 years at the same company. That's almost unheard of today. We might have some 20-year veterans at places, but nothing like in the olden days of my father's generation. My father got a silver bullet, so he was able to retire, but he also did something really smart. He stocked away a lot of his vacation time that he kept accruing as he continued his life in General Electric, and we always felt GE brought good things to life because it paid for our lives. And while they were modest, considering the number of children my father had, he did a great job managing the family budget and deciding how to take his vacations and what to trade in for General Electric stock. I know there was one year my father didn't make a decision right in his investing, and he told us he lost like $1 million. I was sad for him because he really loved to play that game. He really loved to make sure that he and his wife would be well cared for in their retirement years. And because he chose to work in the military and became a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, he actually was able to retire with some good benefits so that when he became ill, he was covered. And my mother didn't have to stress and didn't have to go to work after virtually never working most of her adult life. Nowadays, I don't actually get to see my mom. My siblings have made it almost impossible for me to have a relationship with her. And it's not that I don't love my mom. I love my mom a lot. I just don't like being around people who lie or who manipulate others or who then forget what they have and haven't said or haven't done. And unfortunately, that is the challenge when we get late in our years, that we don't always remember who we've met, what we did, or where we've been. And so I sort of participate in a network marketing organization that allows me to have some excellent, incredible biohacking science that really helps to keep the mind sound and the body pretty secure. It's actually been debunked by ABC Primetime Live, John Quinones, and the truth is, what he found was it was absolute truth. That the 40 years of research that the scientist who won the Ellen Crescent medal won is literally good stuff. I believe he's still on the product himself, and that was back in 2005. I have continued in my journey of homelessness to recommend the product, and in truth, it's been easier and easier the more homeless I've been. It's not that I'm saying, look, I'm homeless, I need some help. Never have to say that ever. I just am talking about talking to people about their lives, and it reminds me a lot of a lady I really regard highly who's in my LinkedIn network, who does another brand of network marketing, but she always talked about that it's about the relationship. And it's not about the numbers, as the people like to say, because people don't like to be referred to as a number. And yet, there's an incredible numbering system that the Lord has utilized to help people know who their life path people are and who to avoid and who is supposed to transform their lives. So far, I've discovered the number that I have needed to know in my life. And that number is literally a really unique number. And yet the monsters who've been stalking me and trying to find out all this information about me probably know that number too. But they don't recognize what it means for me. It meant love in a lot of different ways, and it also meant hate in a way, in that those people have harmed my life with unlawful commentary about my life to people that had no right to know anything about our relationships in that way. You see, in life, we have moments of time to make a difference for people, and we're either loving them in a way that they become all that they can be in the world, or we're losing them to our own lies about our rights in our life. And our rights in their life is what I mean. You see, we have rights that belong to us alone, like I started with. Our paperwork, our personhood, our paperwork, and our property. And literally you can interchange that and flip it all the way around to say paperwork, property, and personhood. It doesn't really matter the order, I suppose, but we usually kind of think of ourselves first before we think about something intangible. So that's why I sort of get a little off track. But I'm also pretty tired. I sleep for 4 hours, then I get up and move when the Lord tells me to move so that I don't get hit and someone isn't painting my feet black like they do to people in the Muslim countries when they're trying to humiliate them or trying to inject me with something that I don't want in my body. And openly, that's not their right to do. And yet we have monsters in the world, monsters and fishers, Nazis, and I'm saying this gently, I don't mean actual Nazis, I just think it rhymes with Noblesville. So in Noblesville, who literally thought they had the right to trespass a man from food and involve lies to do it, to harm a person's life. You see, there are people in this world who just like to harm people. They don't think about whether or not they'll be liable to God for what they've done. They won't think far enough ahead to whether or not they'll be liable in their own life to the fact they could get fired for their liabilities. You see, liabilities are things that we hold to God, but liabilities are also things we hold to the law. And if we have violated federal law and done things such as stalking, harassment, theft of personal property, and other things, we can be totally liable to the law. But when I talk about these things, people sometimes get upset. They don't want to be reminded of the fact that retirement is coming quickly, and they may not have any money in the bank at all. They may be so busy paying their rent, paying their car payment, paying for clothing, paying with technology, all to keep up with the Joneses that they have absolutely nothing set aside. I'm very fortunate that if I die, I have something set aside, but I also know that someone has monstrously stolen those policies, really stolen the copies of those policies. I know this for a fact because of how I was keeping them, where I had them, and the fact that they're gone. I literally just got some mail on that too, and that mail is now gone too. And I wonder what sort of person has been trained to believe that they have the right to do anything remotely like what I've experienced. In other words, what little idea did they ever get, and from who, that made a person think that they had the right to put their hands in someone's pockets, whether it's a shirt pocket, a jacket pocket, pants pocket, a shoe pocket, a sock pocket, it doesn't really matter. Even a jockstrap pocket is still private to the individual. And what gives them that right to do anything like that at all? You see, my rights are mine and your rights are yours, and I would never dream of touching your body without permission. I would never dream of stealing your rights away and saying you can't utilize what you've created here. But there are people in the force, there are people across the land who think that that's an appropriate play to teach someone a lesson. Really? What lesson are you teaching? Are you teaching the love of Jesus, or are you teaching that you think you're in control of someone else's life? The reality is you're not in control. The God controls everything, and literally you cannot outplay God. If you've done something dishonest, you need to just go to that person and say, hey, we need to talk, I need to tell you something. You need to let the cards fall where they may. But in life, we have this right to take our own responsibility. There's signs all over town about this, trying to remind us of how we need to keep responsible. But the reality is, so many people shirk responsibility, it's not even funny. Now I'm starting to fall asleep again because I've probably been programmed to say that anytime I want to record a video, that I should start to fall asleep. It's an immoral act that they've done to me. And if I even comment like this, I bet you there's a handful of you out in listening land that'll say, oh, he's off his rocker, because you just don't believe in what a hate crime can do to a person. You see, hate crime is really where this title begins, that openly when we're interfering with someone's right to life, when we're interfering with their abilities to do things and accomplish things, when we're purposely stalking them to find out what they're really like, We have just broken federal law. The truth is that no one in life is not without fail. And the truth is, we've seen plenty of times that people say, don't give out my information, yet they want to voyeur in on yours. The life worth living and the retirement worth having is never done in ill-willed ways. It's never something that God tells you to do. God doesn't tell you to selfishly attack someone's life because you don't like their lifestyle, and the Lord certainly doesn't ask you to do this in His name. But in His name, people go. And when I say this, what I mean is, what will people think of your life based on how you treated them in their little mini crises, based on what you did to prepare yourself for that opportunity? You see, if you're a good educator, you're going to read a book on education, you might watch a video, but it'll be on the outskirts of your house. And then you'll bring things in that are appropriate to your decoration and your fanfare. In life, we have moments of time to tell someone how we feel, and I'm simply saying it. Don't monkey around in this anymore. The millions will come, and hopefully you'll be on board when it does. Thanks for listening.